Hey everyone, it's Ben Shakini back with another episode of the Give and Grow podcast. This is our social emotional learning series where we dive into conversations with therapists, counselors, mental health, and social emotional learning coordinators so we can share some really important information with parents, teachers, and any adults that are interacting with kids. So today I'm super excited to introduce you guys to April Graham. April is a mental health therapist, a district level mental health coordinator, and also a school counselor down in Charlotte. So April, thank you so much for taking the time today to be on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Ben, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, 100%. So, like I mentioned in the introduction, we're here to talk a little bit about social emotional learning, mental health. So, for those people that might be new or the term might be new for them, social emotional learning, can you just like break down what that is, and why that's important for parents and kids?
Yeah, absolutely. So, social emotional learning has gotten a bad rep, I feel like, over the last few years. And it's really truly misunderstood. But social emotional learning is really just a process that all children at some point in their lives experience and go through, where they're learning how to manage their emotions. They're learning how to build healthy relationships. They're learning how to develop empathy for others, but also learning how to set goals and being able to make responsible decisions. And it's truly the foundation for success. I feel like without these skills, it's very hard to thrive socially, emotionally, academically. We want our kids to be able to handle their feelings. And so SEL, social emotional learning, is all about that.
Awesome. Thank you for breaking that down so simply. I know we're all at different levels of understanding with what social emotional learning is, to your point. Real quick, just to dive into that piece that you shared, why do you think social emotional learning's gotten a bad rap?
I really think it's just a misunderstanding, and miseducation about what its ultimate goal is.
Hmm.
Our public school system is what touches most students in America. And I know that with all the things happening in the world, with Parent Bill of Rights coming out in states, where parents want to have more control of what their kids have access to, I think SEL has kind of gotten thrown into that when it actually, I think, teaches exactly what parents want, their kids to be independent, to be socially prepared for the
Hmm.
world that they're going to be living in. So I just really think it's just misunderstanding and miscommunication.
Hmm. Which obviously plays into the social emotional learning piece,
Mhm.
trying to understand, listen, have empathy, and be able to communicate our wants and needs. So, obviously, a big reason why I'm sure you're passionate about this work, why I'm passionate about it. Um, what are some, empathy stood out to me in one of the things that you said. What are some fun activities or games or, those sorts of things that can help young children develop empathy?
Oh, yeah. So I think really any game can help build some skills, but specifically games that involve like role playing, where you're taking turns engaging in certain emotions, like feeling charade,
Mm.
or reading books that talk about emotions. We have so many books out there that express, for especially for little kids, about how our emotions impact us and what happens when we act on them.
Mhm.
Any games that involve taking turns, sharing, having to be patient. I always say
Mhm.
Monopoly is the longest and best game to teach kids how to have all of those skills.
Mhm.
So I just think really any game is capable of teaching. It's all about what we pull from those games and how we present it to the kids that can help them build those skills while they're playing.
Yeah, being able to pose it and drop in those learning moments, whether there's frustration from losing the game, there's a lack of
Mhm.
patience, like, hey, when is it going to be my turn? Right? We can really set that tone as the adult and make those invitations and, um, yeah, just draw awareness to when those things start to arise. I was having a really cool conversation with a consulting sports psychologist for the Golden State Warriors, and he was talking about the spectrum of games. He was really talking about sports, but I think it ties in here. And I personally get so competitive in a game that I start to swing so far to that competitive end of the spectrum. And then on the other end of that spectrum, he was describing that there's just like the everybody wins, everybody gets a trophy, and those kind of being the two ends of the spectrum. And he's like, when you're on this side of over competitiveness, you lose compassion. And when you have that everybody wins, everybody gets a trophy mentality, you lose resiliency or the opportunity to develop resiliency. And I thought that really pose a really powerful perspective for me to be like, okay, we're kind of playing in there, and where do we kind of want to fall on this, and where can we guide our kids during games, during sports, to a balance that feels good for them, that feels good for us, and is obviously helping us to develop those social and emotional skills. Um, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we want our kids to know how to handle their emotions. Every day, I see kids and parents who that's all they want, right? They want their kid to be successful. They want them to understand that you're going to lose sometimes, right? Losing
Mm-hmm.
is a part of life. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
have failures. We're going to experience rejection. And we have to get better at normalizing that for kids. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that balance is recognizing we can't always be winners and we won't always be losers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we can be happy for someone even when we lose, and we can still show that humility even when we're winners.
Mm-hmm. Powerful, powerful stuff. Kind of segueing into my next question for you, April, is what techniques can parents use to encourage this positive behavior, and reduce some potential tantrums or outbursts?
Yeah. So one thing I try to encourage parents to know is tantrums are normal, right? Kids are going to experience big emotions, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also about teaching them to recognize when we feel these big emotions, there are better ways to handle them. So positive reinforcement is probably one of the biggest strategies any parent can use. And I know it gets frustrating where you're rewarding a child or just even saying all the time, why am I praising them for doing something they know they're supposed to do? But what
Mm.
we fail to recognize is our kids are still learning. They don't always know what they're supposed to do, especially if
Mm.
we're sending them mixed messages. So we want to praise the behaviors that we want to see more of. So that constant, oh, you're so helpful with your little brother when he was sad, right? We want to
Mm-hmm.
type that up and talk about it as often as possible.
Mm-hmm.
We want to give choices, right? Give them the option to be independent because we tend to jump to, well, this is what you're going to do instead of allowing children to have the choice, which they're
Mm.
absolutely capable of doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think another component is just recognizing how important a routine is. Having a
Mm-hmm.
routine builds structure, responsibility, accountability, and it just helps with kids knowing what's expected. And I think
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes we don't realize how much they need those boundaries and limits, how much those routines
Mm-hmm.
really help build character.
Wow, powerful stuff right there. The one thing that jumped out to me, April, that you were sharing is around the choices and being able to like offer them that they're capable of making choices for themselves. Maybe not all these, bigger choices potentially, but can you just talk about some of those choices, how you might be able to pose choices to make that accessible for kids, not overwhelming for kids, but also comfortable for parents?
Oh, sure. So the one caveat is no, their choices may not always work, right?
Mm-hmm.
We want to give them the option, but sometimes we will have to make them for them sometimes. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're giving choices, you just phrase it as we can choose to do this or that. And you
Mm-hmm.
allow them to decide, right? You want to limit the
Mm-hmm.
scope of choices, right? So as to not overwhelm them. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, if it's about fighting with your kid about what shoes to wear, give them two choices, right? Either they can wear this one, and we might want to explain why these shoes are most appropriate for whatever the situation is, but also allow them the opportunity to say, no, I want to have control over what I want to wear. So give them that other option and let them
Mhm.
decide. If it doesn't hurt anything, if they're going to be fine with that choice and it works out, allow them to do that.
Mhm.
And that can go with lunch choices,
Mhm.
how they do and where they do their homework, calm down spaces if you decide. I mean, the choices are
Mhm.
endless that we can offer, but it's really just scaling down the type of choices, tailoring the choices to ones we are also okay with as the
Mhm.
parents and adults in their lives, and it just allowing them to choose and deciding from there how it goes.
I love it because what I'm hearing in that is empowering them to be independent, right? Which
Yes.
we're not
Mhm.
always going to be. Somebody said in another one of these episodes was like roots to grow and wings to fly,
Mhm.
right? Like
Yes.
we're giving them those things. We're not going to always be there for them, so we want them to be able to feel confident and comfortable making those choices for themselves and starting off with those small ones, this or that. Maybe it's A, B, C,
Mhm.
D by the time they're a particular
Mhm.
age, kind of starting
Yeah.
to open it and grow it, but those baby steps. Thanks for dropping
Yes.
all those in there, April. Um,
Yeah.
how can okay kind of shifting to like engaging with other children, right? In school, on a team, just friends hanging out, how can parents help their children understand and respect the feelings of others?
Yes. Reflection, number one strategy. Especially for me as an elementary school counselor, that was probably one of my biggest tools in the toolbox is getting kids to recognize how their choices and actions impact others. So
Mm-hmm.
literally posing the question, when you yelled at your friend, how do you think that made your friend feel?
Mm-hmm.
When I did this for you, how did you feel, right? We want them to start the process that our actions impact people and
Mm-hmm.
that we can impact somebody else's mood when we make certain choices, whether intentional or not, and recognizing that we have the space to potentially talk about it. So putting them in the other person's shoes, right? Building that
Mm-hmm.
empathy where they get to do that perspective taking. That's probably one of the biggest things that you can do, but it also reinforces kindness, right? Taking
Mm-hmm.
care of people, treating people well, and making
Mm-hmm.
sure whatever choices that we make, even if we can't always help hurting them, it's not intentional, but it's also we're just taking that into consideration before we act impulsively sometimes.
The reflection piece I feel is so important in your share, and just as I'm thinking about it here while you were sharing it, we move so fast, especially parents, teachers. We're constantly going. Reflection can easily fall off the map as an important thing to do. Because it's like, especially in the US, it's like on to the next, what's next,
Um,
how can I grow and move forward? This is a powerful step for that process. And it does take some intentionality and some slowing down. But I really appreciate you bringing up that that's your number one strategy, the reflection piece. And another thing that I heard in what you shared was the open ended questions that you asked. It wasn't like, hey, was school good today? You know, it's like, hey, how was your behavior? How those open ended questions. So they really have to sit and think about it, which I think is to your point really going to help to drive home that kindness and that lesson that might be trying to be taught in those moments. Um, beautiful, beautiful. And some early signs for you as a therapist, as a counselor, like what are some early signs that a kid might be struggling with some of these skills?
So I would say frequent tantrums are definitely a sign, and we're talking 8 and above.
Mhm.
Because believe it or not, our 12-year-olds can have tantrums, right? Where they're just acting a certain kind of way, and they're just not able to regulate. So I would definitely say frequent tantrums that are lasting for long periods of time, where no de-escalation is helping support those behaviors. They have difficulty making or even keeping friends, or you notice they're struggling socially. Maybe they're
Mhm.
withdrawing. They're very isolated. They might even struggle with following simple directions, right? You might ask them
Mhm.
to uh, put their coat away, and you have to tell them 5 times.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, those are signs of needs needing to be met and
Mhm.
explored a little bit more. But also just not being able to express themselves in words. At a
Mhm.
certain age, really late elementary, the expectation is that our kids kind of have the vocabulary and somewhat of the skills to be able to kind of control themselves. And when you find that maybe even at third grade or later, they're still continuing to have these same struggles,
Mhm.
that's definitely a sign that you may want to explore that social emotional piece with a therapist or a school counselor.
I was going to ask you that as the follow up question. So, is that like the first step? You might start noticing some of these things. It's school therapy or therapist, school counselor. Uh, Can you kind of just break
Yeah.
that down, like where parents would go or what you recommend?
For sure. Yes, I always recommend start with the school. The school is where you can get the most resources. And so you really want to check in with your kid's teacher, right? Check in with them, see if they're having the same struggle. Oftentimes, teachers are probably already communicating these concerns, so take them seriously, right?
Mhm.
Have a meeting. Parents at any point can request a meeting with the school, and so you can ask for a meeting, talk about what's happening, talk with the school counselor. Oftentimes, you'll get referred to your school counselor in
Mhm.
cases of SEL. And your counselor is a great resource with either providing some of that training and learning or connecting you with resources in the community that could support that as well.
Love that. Thank you so much for just dropping that in there. And I know it can be potentially like overwhelming for a parent to kind of
Mhm.
reach out for support or even just acknowledge that, hey, my kid might be a little behind with some of these skills. But I think you alluded to the idea earlier that every kid's at their own pace. And this is just part of the growing process. We talk about the expectation is for them to be at a certain level by third, fourth grade or whatever. But really, it's wherever the kid's at is okay, and how can we help them to start potentially get caught up to where the average student is or the average kid is at their age. But it's just totally normal for somebody to be behind in here, be behind in math, be behind in speech. It's all these, it's the same thing in any other subject or sport or whatever it is. So can we meet them where they're at and help them out? um are there any like reminders or just little tips for parents that might be struggling to ask for support?
Yes, it all depends on that parent's relationship with school themselves, right? If a parent didn't have a good relationship in school with their teachers, the people, the stakeholders in the building, if they struggle, it's often likely that their kids might experience the same thing, and parents may be
Mhm.
more resistant to reaching out for help. But I say this with all the love. Your school wants the same thing that you do, and that is your child's success. And so, knowing that even if you can't reach that child's teacher, talk with the principal, talk with the
Mhm.
assistant principal, see if you can't connect with your school social worker, that school counselor. Even at the district level where I am now as a mental health coordinator, I've had staff members reach out to me and say, "Hey, this parent wants help. Can you support them?" So there's
Mhm.
oftentimes people at the highest level in your districts who will be happy to support you and walk you through that process. So there are endless amounts of people in your school who are willing to help. And it's okay to be afraid, right? We're talking about social
Mhm.
emotional learning.
Mhm.
And that's part of that, right? Like moving through our fears, moving through that adversity and knowing that someone in that building is willing to listen and help.
Mhm.
So it just goes back to building that relationship with that teacher first, because they are your
Mhm.
first line of defense. So just knowing that your child's experiences don't have to be yours, right? They can be
Mhm.
better and improved.
And how amazing would it have been for us as the adults to have had somebody advocate and ask and
Right.
seek that support for us, right? So like it's really the invitation to kind of break the chain,
Mhm.
and step
Yes.
in and really advocate for your kid and support them in the ways they need to be supported. So really thank you,
Mhm.
April, for dropping in all these tips in here and just reminding people of the value that's in their school, in their town.
Yeah.
um we're like blowing through these questions right now and I'm loving it. Like we're clicking right
Yes.
now. One thing I wanted to we kind of touched on, kids not being able to necessarily have the skills or struggling with some social emotional skills. I think one of the easiest ones to try to hide or bottle up is anger and frustration. Do you have any techniques for parents that might help to like guide a kid through a frustrating or a situation where they're feeling angry?
Yes. Number one strategy, deep breathing.
Mm,
Parents, your kids are watching you. So, whatever you model for them, they are going to do. So, if in our own frustration, we're slamming doors, we're throwing things, we're yelling and shouting, they are going to mimic that because that's
mhm,
what's being modeled for them. So, when we are upset, right, we can model for them by saying, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. Let me take a few deep breaths, and you're
mhm,
modeling that in front of your children. So just establishing a pattern of healthy response to those big emotions and feelings,
mhm,
teaching them how to take deep breaths, right? Blowing out the candle or smelling the flower, creating a safe space. I encourage all
mhm,
parents to create a safe space in your home where no matter who it is, you have a corner, you have some tools there, whether it's fidgets, your favorite animal, a book, anything that helps you feel calm and at peace. Um, that's probably the one of the better ways. Even having some visuals, right? Especially
mhm,
with your younger kids. Amazon has tons of visual aids where you could post it in that calm down space where you're teaching your kids to be able to recognize, well, this is what anger looks like. This is what bored and tired look like. So they can start
mhm,
associating the physical aspect of emotions with the visual piece, and learn how to navigate that more effectively. But modeling is first. We have to model what we want our kids to
mhm.
see and be.
I wanna just a quick excuse me, just a quick follow up on the visual aids. Are you saying that there's like,
Yeah.
something where you're can you just explain that a little more? I'm unfamiliar with
Sure.
those.
Yes. So there are posters that you could buy that have all the faces of different types of emotions. So they could be emoji faces. There
Mhm,
are even visuals of actual examples of kids exhibiting that emotion, like embarrassment or anger, frustration, happiness, excitement, joy. And it helps one build a vocabulary, because a lot
mhm,
of times we're going with angry, sad, mad, happy, right? There's so many more feelings and
mhm,
emotions underneath all of those. And so these visual aids can just help build their vocabulary, but also get them to be a little more aware when they're working with other people, right? Oh, they'll be able to recognize, oh, that person is bored.
mhm.
That
Uh-huh.
person is tired. They're
Mhm,
angry, right? That just really helps build skills all around, not just for them, but for you as well, right? Because
mhm,
if we didn't learn these things coming up through school, this is a very new concept. And so we also could take information from just by providing these visual aids for our own children.
mhm. Beautiful. I appreciate you breaking that down, and I can totally see how like, okay, I'm recognizing what this person's feeling. That's bored. That's frustrated. we just grew. We just expanded our awareness and our ability to communicate these things that we're experiencing. How helpful is that for us as parents to be able to have a kid that's telling us, I'm bored right now, versus just throwing a tantrum potentially. So these are how I just had a clear vision of how this helps to expand everybody's ability to cope with some of these more challenging emotions. You mentioned modeling, and I immediately flashed to like today's basketball practice, and the kids were all talking. We had an extra long practice, so kids were getting, just like tired. It's the end of the day, it's after school, and I shut down because I was overwhelmed. Everybody was talking. I felt overwhelmed, shut down, didn't have a reflection at the end of practice, and it's easy to kind of to kick ourselves, when we mess up the modeling piece because we're learning and growing too. And we can really care about how we show up for these kids. So any words of encouragement for parents that are just like kind of learning and maybe struggling with the modeling piece?
Right. Yes, take it one day at a time. We are not perfect. If we were, we wouldn't be having this conversation, right? We wouldn't be trying to improve our own behaviors and the behaviors of our kids. So just be kind to yourself. Give yourself grace. The fact that you're trying to take the steps and make the effort into just changing is is enough,
Mhm,
because we're not going
mhm,
to get it right every time. There's no
mhm,
manual for how to be the perfect person, right? We learn from our mistakes, we learn from our experiences. So just use them as learning experiences and keep
mhm,
trying and keep pushing forward because you're doing the work by simply trying, and your kids
mhm.
will be able to see that too.
Beautiful. April, enough said. I feel like that's the mic drop moment right there. Truly, just encouraging all you parents out there. Yeah, keep trying. You're going to learn through those failures. Everything April just said. I don't want to like mansplain right now. I just like really like reiterating these things because they're so
Yes.
helpful. And I'm like taking in these lessons for myself too here today. So, April, thank you so much for your time and your energy today, and just sharing all these beautiful tips and tools and practices that we can all start to incorporate into our lives. I hope everybody listening found something that they're willing to give a try, or just a nice friendly reminder to, oh yeah, I got to bring back in the reflection piece. Those visual aids might help my kid. Whatever it is, we hope you walk away with something valuable today. April, is there somewhere that people like can get in touch with you and reach out to you if they want any support, or maybe if you have any resources out there?
Yes, you can always reach out to me on Facebook, NG April. You can also find me on Instagram at the Black School Counselor. Any resources you need, just find me, April Neville Graham. Google me. You can find me somewhere, and I'll be happy to help and talk to anyone who's just trying to navigate parenthood.
Awesome, amazing, and we'll share links to all those different, Facebook, Instagram, that sort of thing, so you guys can easily tap into those in the description of this video, as well as on the blog article that will coincide and summarize this whole conversation. So, April, once again, thank you so much. Have fun down in Charlotte, and yeah, keep spreading that love and wisdom.
Thank you so much, Ben. I appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.